It's where the sport is going now with some of these big money contracts. So the Astros are definitely out on that. The most money they've ever offered a player is the Alex Bregman deal, $156 million. Carlos Correa was close to that at like 152, and he was begging the Astros, just like Alex Bregman probably has, to stay here in Houston. So if you can't keep Bregman, you can't double that salary and keep Kyle Tucker.
Dana Brown also, at yesterday's winners meetings, had this to say when asked about potential offers for Kyle Tucker and Framber Valdez.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, you would listen on all the players. I don't think that, you would, turn a deaf ear to any of these guys. I think the big thing is if you have an opportunity to make the club better, that you would at least listen to other clubs and see if there's something that makes sense for the club in the present and also long term.
Okay. I mean, he's doing his job. He should be listening. Like that should be the number one job of any general manager, is that you should listen on everybody. That everyone besides Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez should be listened on. You're not a good general manager if you're not at least listening.
Well,
right?
To a degree, yeah, you should be listening, but you don't say you're listening.
Especially when Chandler just put out a piece on The Athletic, and one of the anecdotes he had in here was that during last year's winter meetings, Dana Brown emphatically denied that the team would explore trades for impending free agent Alex Bregman.
Oh, boy.
So it's very different. Those are two very different tones. Straight denial to being, acting like you're open to it. Dana Brown was also asked, and I apologize if we have this audio, I think it's just a quote, that he's convinced that they can still win the AL West without one of these guys. He said that in Chandler's piece. So if you're willing to acknowledge that you think you can win the AL West without Kyle Tucker or Framber, and you're listening, and everyone's reporting that the Cubs and the Yankees are calling on Kyle Tucker, kind of feels like one of those guys is getting moved this offseason.
I hate it. Absolutely hate it. I think that they've screwed up the relationship with Kyle Tucker. Just take a look at the different messaging coming out of Camp Kyle Tucker and the Astros last year when it came to a broken bone in his shin that he clearly had, that the Astros said was a bruise that kept him out for months. Tucker even said at the end of the whole absence that he had that there was a fracture. And the Astros are making up medicine on the fly. There's no such thing as a deep bone bruise. There's no such thing. No such thing.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
So they effed that up. I don't think that the relationship with Kyle Tucker can be fixed. So I guess if that's the situation, then maybe you do have to trade him. But I hate it. I hate the possibility of it. I feel like Dana Brown should have done what he normally does as the politician he is, which is to lie. I wish he had lied to me. He didn't lie to me. And now I am concerned that they are going to do the worst thing possible, which is to move on from either of those two. Sorry, I want to go down with the ship. I do not want to see those two go for some random scrub prospects that'll probably suck, because they probably will suck. Do not try to tell me otherwise. Don't try to tell me about Chauncey Beauregard or some other some rando, okay? Doesn't exist, not real, until they are. Yes, I am not big picture baseball guy. In fact, I'm a baseball casual. But do not try to sell me on the idea that you take a step back to take a step forward. Nope, you are all in with what you have right now. That is Tucker, that is Framber. And I am concerned. I am concerned that things are going to change in the next couple of weeks, and this team is going to go back to being a I don't care about them kind of team.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't make these trades and hit on these guys to what you're right. Prospects are such a wild card. Like, and I don't want these guys to also be traded. If they're going to go down this path of trading Kyle Tucker and Framber, I'm definitely more open to it than you are. My problem with it is that I don't want guys who are in A-ball and in double A. Like, I don't want guys who are, like when Dana Brown, we played the audio yesterday about Bryce Matthews. He didn't say Bryce Matthews specifically, but he said the replacements are 8 to 12 months away from being ready to replace Alex Bregman. I don't want to trade for a bunch of those guys. If you're trading these guys, I need major league ready guys that fill, center field, first base, third base, right field. Like, you have to fill your gaps and actually players that can be on the roster for the next 6 years. I don't want to wait 3 years for prospects for a guy like Kyle Tucker.
But are you going to get that if you make a trade? Like, that's the problem. I don't see you getting somebody that is that good, that is a guy who is ready to go right now in exchange for Kyle Tucker. You are going to be trading for in the short-term loss, no matter what. You're just going to be moving on from a 5-tool player who does struggle in the postseason for someone who is not going to be a 5-tool player. And maybe you get a couple of pieces, but do a couple of pieces, fix the issues that you had last year where your offense can't do a damn thing after the top of the order.
No, most likely they don't.
No, I mean, it definitely shrinks the scare power of your lineup.
Now, I think there's a way to bring in guys to extend your lineup while also weakening the top of it, because really after 1 through 4 of, if let's say Bregman's gone. So if it's right now, it's Altuve, it's Bregman. I mean, Altuve, Tucker, Jordan, and then Yainer Diaz. The rest of your lineup is guys like John Singleton and, Zach DeZenzo, guys who are not like great baseball players. So at least if you trade Kyle Tucker and you get 2 or 3 guys that can fill your lineup.
Don't say at least.
I know.
Don't.
I know.
Don't give me this. This is. I can't do it.
It's just the reality, because like what happened with Juan Soto this weekend does directly affect Kyle Tucker. Like his WAR and like the statistical stuff is, he's not the player Juan Soto is, of course. He's not, in terms of what he brings to the lineup, he's not that guy. But he's a better defensive player. He's better on the base pass. He's a full-on 5-tool player. And while we know his playoffs, failures of what they are, other teams will look at from a regular season view of this trade. When Kyle Tucker hits free agency next year, he's going to get a $300 million contract at least. And now with the Soto deal being $756 million baseline, like Kyle Tucker might get $350. He could get close to $400. It's where the sport is going now with some of these big money contracts. So the Astros are definitely out on that. The most money they've ever offered a player is the Alex Bregman deal, $156 million. Carlos Correa was close to that at like $152, and he was begging the Astros, just like Alex Bregman probably has, to stay here in Houston. So if you can't keep Bregman, you can't double that salary and keep Kyle Tucker. It's just not the reality. Jim Crane's not going to do it. We don't live in that world. And at some point, if you don't have a replacement, like you don't have a prospect to fill your center field gap, your first base gap, your third base gap, your left field gap, your right field gap. Like, you don't have a bullpen arm. Like, that's why trading these guys actually, like, it sucks. It sucks that that's where you're at. But they traded all their prospects for pursuing World Series, and it was great. But they're now at a position to where if they're not willing to get big money like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Red Sox potentially, and now the Mets, then you have cornered yourself into a position to where you've drafted poorly. I know Jeremy Booth talked about that a lot when he was on with us. The drafting stuff goes back farther, that not just losing the draft picks you have from the sign stealing scandal, but you just don't have those elite level prospects to even have a positive view of what could come down the road. Like, you have to make a big decision, and you either die with the ship like you're talking about, or you reload. That's where they're at.
Possibly reload.
Possibly. Try to reload.
You just made me want to walk into traffic.
I'm sorry, Paul. The Astros run's been great, but this is a critical offseason of just how they're going to handle it going forward.
So hearing you just lay it out like that.
Oh, come to the dark side, Paul.
I mean, I'm not co-signing any of this because if as soon as they move on from Bregman, I see the possibility where, okay, well, let's trade Kyle Tucker. Let's trade Framber Valdez. It does make sense to a degree to do it afterwards, but I can't sign off on that.
Would you be pro Framber being moved because of the depth of the rotation?
Well, they talk about the depth of the rotation all the time, and I'm making an inappropriate gesture to that. Like, okay, they're all injured, so relax with that. I can't co-sign it. I mean, they said that they're going to keep the window as open as long as they possibly can. So, I mean, they're probably lying to us, and guess what? Sports teams do that. But, no, I just don't want to do it. I can't co-sign this.
I understand.
I don't – the idea of going back to what you were and this team being like middle of the road, I have zero interest in that.
Honestly, like I don't think they have to do that. Like we see teams have used trades and big moves and still had success. The Milwaukee Brewers are a great example of being in a lesser division, trading their best player to the Baltimore Orioles last year and still winning it. The Padres are a great example of this. Like, they had core pieces. They traded Juan Soto away to the New York Yankees, got a ton of prospects in return, and what they then did with those prospects is flipped them for Dylan Cease, and they built their rotation that way. So, like, there are creative ways. I'm with you. I do not co-sign the idea of taking a player and a team that's this talented and bottoming it out on purpose. This is not a mid-level baseball team, even though they struggled last year at times. There has to be a middle ground here. And I think the real question is just like, do we trust Dana Brown to pull this off?
At the major league level, no. When it comes to his ability to figure out who's good and who isn't at the minor league level, benefit of the doubt, I think, is earned just given what he did in Atlanta. But I'm skeptical. I just think it doesn't matter who you are as a general manager. It's really hard to predict who's going to be good and who's not. And to this point, I think part of it just has to do with the fact that by association, you think about the very handsy Jeff Bagwell, Reggie Jackson, Jim Crane, Astros Letterman jacket, Skull and Bone Society, and the way that they effed things up of late. Even though Dana Brown wasn't a part of it, like I have a hard time feeling confident separately in Dana Brown. I think it's perhaps partly due to the fact that he hasn't been here that long. And the other part of it is, too, is when he talks, he tends to maybe not put his foot in his mouth, but I feel like a politician is talking to me and doing a little sing-songy dance for me, and I just push back against it automatically.
I think they've put their foot in their mouth. People are the way they're talking about Bregman, the word optimistic, and the way they're discussing, how they're feeling on him returning to the Astros. Like, the fan base was already going to be upset before, but I think that they're giving off this portrayal that they're actually trying to get Alex Bregman to return versus what happened with Carlos and George. I think fans will be a lot more upset, and it's totally fair to question Dana Brown. I mean, look at the last 2 years, and look, these are prospects, and none of them have done anything yet, right? But would you feel better about where the Astros are at today if they had some combination of, the pitcher, Gloss, or whatever his name was, Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, Will Wagner, Joey Loperfido? Those are the 5 prospects you traded the last 2 years for Justin Verlander and Yusei Kikuchi. And what did you get out of them? You didn't get a lot. Now, and I think that to your point, the first trade goes back to the Skull and Bone Society, that they wanted JV back.
You could make the argument the second trade does too.
Yeah,
because it's a short-term rental, and it's window open, window open, window open. Oh God, Joe,
they're in a tough spot.
Oh man, oh God, this is sobering. From the 409, JC, y'all act like this team is still so talented. Wake the F up. This team is not what it used to be. Multiple guys that had career years, and now everyone thinks they are so talented. Most people are agreeing with the idea of, all right, well, let's strip for parts. Let's get the most that we can. I don't like it. Where's the rebellion? Okay, and again, I'm the idiot baseball casual here. I'll admit that. Where are the people that are like me that say, damn that, I don't want this. I don't want to take a step back ever.
I think there are people who don't think that, like, they think the Astros are more indicative of the start of the season last year and how it ended. You started the season absolutely terribly. It was a grind to get back into first place. You had to come back a 10-game deficit in the AL West, and then you lost 2 games to the Tigers, who had like a quarter of your payroll. If it wasn't less than that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of people who, like, that's part of the reason why they're pro tear it down. And I think a lot of people are just tired of seeing players walk, for nothing. It's frustrating.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose, too, if we're being realistic, okay, anything can happen in baseball's playoffs, but was this Astros team beating this year's Dodgers, if we're being honest?
No, they're not beating next year's Dodgers.
Sure doesn't feel that way.
Now, that might be also an impossible bar at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They're so good, and they added more.
They owned the Yankees in the playoffs, but the Yankees had the upper hand in the regular season this past year. Other teams in the American League, you own Baltimore for what it's worth, or at least you did this past season. But it stands to reason that eventually Baltimore is going to figure it out. And then after that in the American League, who else would you say is above you? Like, that's where it's tricky, because you can definitely talk yourself into saying, oh, well, I mean, anything can happen, and they're fine.
I mean, if you run it back next year, who would you bet on to beat the Astros to go to the World Series? To everything you just said, not the Yankees.
See, Guardians maybe, but even then, like, that's
like the Royals, like the Tigers. The
Definitely not the
American
Tigers.
League is not that strong. I still think like the biggest threat to the Astros might be in your division. Like they can make one last hurrah of Tucker, Framber, Bregman, and this core, and there's still a chance that they could, go all the way next year. The American League is not that impressive. The talent is leaving the American League. It mostly sits in the National League. Doesn't mean you'll win the World Series, but could you get there? I think it's totally reasonable. I bet you, without even having to look at it, I bet you the Astros are the second favorite in the American League to go to the World Series right now. I can almost guarantee you.
interesting.
I think they are. I saw that after the Soto news drop that they whatever. The Yankees are, I think, still the favorite, but they lost. Obviously their odds became longer, and the Astros got a lot of that. Kind of odd movement in their favor.
Interesting.
And look, yeah, the Astros are the third American League team, and they are 7th overall in terms of winning the World Series.
Who's ahead of them in the AL?
So to get to the World Series, to win the American League, it's the Yankees plus 310, the Orioles plus 425, and the Astros
I can
plus
see the Orioles
550.
being ahead of them.
And then the next
Win a
three
playoff
teams are all plus 1200. There's a crazy drop off
because it's a bunch
after
of
the top.
I mean, the Astros literally were an 88 win team, but there's just a lot of 88, 90 win teams in the American League or the AL Central where it's one of these teams is going to win 95 games, and we're going to be like, is this real? The entire time. Obviously, a lot can change. There's still every other free agent basically available other than Juan Soto, so it depends on what you mentioned the Red Sox doing or the Jays, if anyone wants to take the Blue Jays money. That there's a lot of the Tigers, a team that's been rumored to be in the Bregman sweepstakes. So there's a lot to go on, but I do agree with Joe where it's like the AL doesn't seem super competitive at the top like it was back in 2019 or whatever, where the Astros and Yankees were like head and shoulders above everyone else.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in the American League, like the Orioles, the core they have screams the next Houston Astros in the American League. But what are they? They've been a disaster in the playoffs.
They got swept the last 2 years.
Yeah, like I'll believe it when I see it for them. So the Astros can run it back, and yeah, you'll lose Tucker and Framber in free agency next year. Maybe you could keep Framber. Like I think that one could be on the table if you wanted to. But you'll definitely lose Tucker, and then you'll have real questions. But for this year, if they just want to run it back, they've still got a real shot to go to the World Series.